Okay, this is video number 36 in the playlist that's devoted to the Surface tab of the Generative Shape Design 3D Experience CATIA application. Now, the icon that we're going to be discussing is Adaptive Sweep, which is one of the advanced icons. And when you're in the generative shape design, at the bottom of the screen, you see the ribbon like that, and you have access to both sweep and the adaptive sweep. I've done several videos, quite a few of them, about 20 of them maybe, on sweep. But now we're going to be looking at the adaptive sweep. When you click on the adaptive sweep, you get this dialog box, and notice that you need to select or have a guiding curve and a spine. They don't have to be the same, but if you select a guiding curve, automatically it's going to be used as the spine. Okay, but they don't have to be the same. And then there is the profile that you want to see, okay, which is called the sketch. Okay, if there is no reference surface, then a default reference surface is used, which is called the mean plane. Okay. Let me give you an idea of what the whole idea behind adaptive sweep is. This is taken from a RAND 3D presentation. So suppose you have a profile here or a sketch here, and you have a spine or a guide curve, and you would like to take this rectangle and sweep it along that guide curve. However, the dimensions you want it to be changed. The difference between adaptive sweep and sweep is that sweep takes the original profile, keeps it like that with those same dimensions and everything, and then sweeps it, okay? But adaptive sweep allows you to change the information at different sections, which are called user sections, okay? Now, a couple of things is that in order to do adaptive sweep, you must have a fully constrained sketch profile, okay? And that causes some issues initially when you are not familiar with the whole icon. So we will consider that in a minute. And then the surface is computed along the guide curve, respecting these dimension and constraints. Okay. And then you can change those dimensions as you will see. Okay. Now, the only thing is that keep in mind that the initial profile that you use in order to do the sweeping process or the adaptive sweep process must be normal to the guide curve. Otherwise, it comes back with an error message. Okay? I'll do several examples. One of them is in this video. One of them is a circle along a spine that's given like that. You can see that the size of the circle is changing and it's being swept. And then another one with a rectangle. Okay? Now, the one thing you have to be careful is that if you need the intersection between if you need a point on the sketch curve in order to apply your constraints, etc., then you should be using intersect 3D element in the sketcher. Okay, do not use this. This is not in the sketcher. This is in the wireframe or in the wireframe section. Don't use this. Now, in the present, uh, when you create that, when you use this intersect 3D element, a point is created on the sketch, and make sure before you try to do the adaptive sweep, that point, don't delete it, of course you can't delete it, but turn it to construction element. This is very important, otherwise you get error messages saying can't do it, etc. I'm mostly following the stuff in this channel, that particular link. But of course, that's for CATIA V5. And I'm going to be doing it very closely. And then there's another one by Rand, which is very good. And finally, the stuff from the Central Michigan University, which is down here. But these are all for CATIA V5. Okay? So let's go ahead and do this. All right. For my first example, which is going to be a circle, which is adaptively swept along a arbitrary guide curve. I'm gonna first make my guide curve. Incidentally, I'm gonna draw the guide curve in a plane. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be a 3D space, but in 3D curve. But I'm going to use a spline here and draw it in the plane. So let me use a spline here like that. All right, exit. And let's not worry about dimensions. Now, this is going to be my guide curve later on. And what I'm going to do is create my sketch. Now remember, the sketch has to be normal to the spine, or this guide curve initially. So what I'm going to do is create for example, a point somewhere here. It really doesn't matter. Somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to go to the wireframe, a point on a curve. For example, on this curve, I'm gonna make my guide curve, my sketch in a plane normal to this. But for a reason that may not be obvious to you, I'll create a couple of more points here. Okay, you might say, why do you need these more points? It's okay, you'll see that. So, for example, this point. Okay, and let me do another one here too. Another point over here. Okay, good. So my sketch is going to go to a plane that's normal at this location. Okay, I just happen to like this location. You could have taken that to be the endpoint. It really doesn't matter. So plane, and you go normal to a plane. See if we can find it. Normal to a curve, not a plane. Normal to a curve, and this is going to be the curve, and the point is right there. Okay. All right. Now, notice that there's a point here. Okay, there is a point here. I'm not going to use this point. So that's why I'm going to hide it later on. Obviously, I can't delete it because this plane is based on it, but I'm going to hide it. Okay, I'm going to hide this point. This point. Okay. Now, on that plane, I will draw my circle. Okay, now. Or my the circle that I want to see. Now the only thing is that I can draw it here. There's no problem. For example, like this. Okay, and I'm going to dimension it like that. The only thing is that I want the center of this circle to be a specific distance away from the guide curve or the guide curve. The only thing is that you may be tempted to select this and dimension it from here, but it doesn't work. So I'm going to exit this. And then you go to, I want to create in that sketch. See that? In that sketch, I want to create a point which is exactly the intersection location of that plane with that guide curve. Now, that's where this thing comes into the picture. In other words, when you're in the sketcher, use the intersect 3D element, it creates that point for you. So let me go back to that sketch and find that intersect 3D elements, select it. It says, which is the element that you want? I want this guide curve to be the intersection to be found as when it intersects that plane. So that sketching plane. So click on it. notice that when I say okay here, a point is created right there. You see this? There's a point right there. And that point, in fact, is, if you look at it, is called the intersection point, mark 1. Okay. Now here, it's kind of hard to see it here, but it's right there. And this is not the same point. It coincides with that point, but I deleted that because I want you to realize that if they were sitting on top of each other, the position of that circle must be measured from this intersection point. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. Unfortunately, the color of this is yellow. You can hardly see it. So if you look at the normal view, let me see the normal view right there. There's a point that right at that location. See that? In fact, if you put the cursor, put the cursor on mark 1, I can change the color of it so that if you can see it better. In fact, let me see if I can actually change the color of it. Properties, let me see the graphics, the color. Let me see if I can change that thing to blue or something like that. Right there, you see that? It's supposed to be, you can see this. Okay. Now we're going to dimension between this point and that circle, because later on horizontal, for example, dimension. Okay. And then another dimension between this point and that vertical. Believe me, you can waste a lot of time if you don't realize that you need to take that 3D intersection. Okay. Now, notice that this becomes completely green because the radius is determined and the distance from that point, intersection point, is determined. That's why it's fully constrained. So that's what this is talking about. Constrained sketch profile. A constraint. Okay. All right. Exit. Now, I will come back to that because remember, I said, if needed, don't forget to turn the intersection point into construction element, because otherwise you get an error message because your sketch is not going to be closed, or your sketch is not going to be there's going to be open point here, so it's not going to be closed. Let me put that. So look, I'm going to select this point, which is that marking point. Let me try it again and turn it into construction. I did turn it into construction. In fact, you can always check that by going to analysis. If you look at the sketch analysis, there's a single closed curve. If I had not done that, there would be a point. Just to convince you, let me go back here and turn this thing into non-construction. And if you click on sketch analysis, see there's an open thing here. You can close it from here if you want. You can turn it to construction right here. You can do that here. Okay. Did it do it? I'm not sure actually. Let me select this, turn it to construction, and I thought you could do it from there, but maybe I didn't pay attention. Right there. It's a single closed curve. Now, exit. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to do an adaptive sweep of this circle along that spine. And what that means is I want to be able to change the size and the relative position with respect to that intersection point. So we'll see that. So we go to the surface tab, adaptive sweep. The guide curve is that spline. And notice that automatically it uses it as a spine. There is no reference surface. There is no surface that I'm using. So you use the default surface, which is something called mean plane. That's okay. And the actual sketch is right there, this circle. Now, assuming that this circle does not cause, when it's swept, does not cause any self-intersecting situation. For example, if you look at it, preview, there we are. But That's not what I want to do, okay? Because I want to add, let me hide this. Let me, okay. Let me add those points. See here, you put the cursor, look, you put the, let me preview it here, right there. And I don't want to see these things, so close it, back into it. Okay, good. Look, you put the cursor on the support right there. You see that? Left click on the point 4, and go and remember those points that I created here? And I told you don't know why I'm doing it, because I want to create a user section at this location with its own parameters. One, so a section has been created. Notice that that yellow thingy moved to that location. And now I'm going to put the cursor to that location. Another section has been created. And if you want to go all the way to the end, you can select that at the very end. And incidentally, if you want to do it like this may not go all the way to the end. You may have to select that, okay? If you want to do it. So I'll just keep it like this, no problem. Now, if you select a parameter, any one of these can be changed. Now, this is the original one that I made, made. If you go to user section 2, notice that I can change the size of this circle. For example, the radius of it, watch this blue thingy. You see, it's getting bigger. And I can even change the position of it, as long as it's not going to cause a problem for the sweeping process. Okay, go to section 2, section 3. Section 3, I leave it exactly like it is. The very last section, section 4, which was the last section, let me make this thing bigger. And even the position of it, switch it a little bit, and maybe switch it a little bit, maybe move it down a little bit, and then we say preview. There we are. There we are. Now, if I realize that, oh, I also want this thing to go all the way to the end, so you go to the, again, sections, put the cursor there, select this last point, okay, and for example, you can use it, yeah, I'll just leave it as default values, whatever they are, and then we say, okay, there we go. Wow. There's a few things you have to remember. To get that intersection point, you use intersect 3D elements in the sketcher. And then, don't use this. And then, don't forget to turn that into construction entity before you do the sweep. Okay? All right. So next I'm going to do this rectangle. Okay, for my second example, I am going to do a three-dimensional curve instead of drawing that spline in XY plane or XZ plane, YZ plane. It's going to be a three-dimensional one. I want to remind you that this particular video 36, it says the basics, okay? Because there will be a video 37, which is a bit more complicated situation as far as the profile and the guide curve is concerned, okay? So let's go back here. I'm going to create maybe 4 points in space and put a spline through them. The points are completely kind of arbitrary, so let's go ahead and do the points in space. So I'm going to do it on a plane. I'll show you what I mean by that. Here is one point. I'll do another one. For example, on the same plane, another one like that, and another one, another one, another one on this plane, like so. And finally, the last one, I make sure that it's on a different plane so that this becomes a three-dimensional uh, curve. So let me do another point, but not on the same plane. I'll do it on a different plane, maybe on the horizontal plane. So yeah, good. Now, if I connect these with a curve, I go to a wireframe and spline, and for example, this thing, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, and 4 point, and say, okay, if you look at this thing, this is a curve in space. Okay, good. So let me make my sketch. I already have some points here that I can use later on, for example, for changing a user parameter at that location. Now, I already have a point here. I can create my plane normal to that curve at that location. There we are. I don't need this point, so I'm just going to hide that. That first point I'm going to hide. Like this. It's easier to do it from here. That first point I'm going to hide. Good. Now, I go to that sketch. Now remember, I need a point here, intersection between this plane and that 3D spline. So what I do is I go to right here, you go intersect 3D elements. Okay, that's this intersect 3D elements. Okay, click on it. It says, what is it that you want to intersect? It's this spline that I want to find its intersection with the sketch plane, which is right we are looking at. And then we say, okay. Notice that the point has been created right there. Right there. It's a tiny blue thing. You can change the color if you want. In fact, if you don't trust me, you go there, right-click properties, change the color to blue, change the size of it so that we can see it better, maybe to this. I think size of it may be okay. There, you can see that. Now later on, remember, don't forget, don't forget to turn that into construction, okay? All right, so go back here, normal view. Here's the normal view. Right there. Okay, so whatever I do is with respect to this plane. So let me go ahead and draw, for example, rectangle. Let me see. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. All right. For example, dimension this like that, and dimension it like this. And I want to find dimension between this point and that point, the horizontal. If I'm using that yellow coordinate system that you see here. And finally, this point and that point. Vertically. There we are. Good. Exit. Now, keep in mind that if you put a big thing here, it may not be able to sweep it, but I think this probably will be okay. We'll find out. We'll find out. Now we go to adaptive sweep. You go to surface, adaptive sweep. The guide curve is right here. And automatically it becomes a spline. Not spline, sorry. Becomes a spine, not spline. A guide curve is that spline, and automatically it becomes spine. A default plane is selected. I don't have a reference surface. And the sketch is that rectangle. Okay. So now I'm going to select my points. So this point and that point which just happen to be the points of the spline. It really doesn't matter. Now for each one of them, I can go to the parameter. For example, the first one is the one over here that I did. The first one was, let me see. The first one is the one over here that I did. Let me go to the second one. Let's change the size of this thing. Make it smaller and smaller this way. Maybe even change the location of it a little bit. Okay, now go to the next one. Well, incidentally, when you did this, you can say previously how it looks like. Now it looks like it didn't like it, and let me see why it didn't like it. Maybe the size of it. Let's go ahead and change it. Let's go to parameters. This was section 2. Yep, and let me make it smaller. Preview. Oh, you know what? Oh my God! This. Do not forget to turn the intersection point into construction elements. Son of a gun. After all that preaching, I forgot. So let's go back here. This is the kind of error message that you get. Say, okay, no problem. Cancel that. Cancel that. Let's go back to that sketch. Back to the sketch. And turn this thing into construction. Exit. Let's do it now. Oh, adaptive sweep. We cancel that. Adaptive sweep. First one is the guide curve, which automatically is used as a spine. The sketch is right here. Now my points are going to be, for example, this point. And this is another section. And this is the last section. Now let's go ahead and change the sizes, parameters. The first one, let me do, first one is what I drew. This is the second one. Let me make this thing a different size, maybe a little bit smaller. A little bit smaller this way. Location of it. I mean, remember, you can't put things here and expect it to work for every situation. So let me change the point position. Go to section 3. Section 3, I leave it the way it was. Go to section 4, which is at the very end. Make it bigger this way, bigger that way. Maybe change the position of it a little bit. And let's see if it works. Okay, preview. There we are. Hallelujah. You see what this thing did to me? I forgot to turn in the construction element. I kept getting those messages. And then you can go here and do things. By the way, notice that if you go to the adaptive sweep, you can also do the relimitation. Let you know that this relimitation tab, I could not get it to work for the version that I have. So either I'm not sure what the process is, or it's just not working. I'm sorry, but that was my experience. Right, folks, so video 37 is going to be a bit more complicated as far as the sweeping shape is concerned and the constraining of the sketch is concerned. All right, good luck.